Welcome to the Spiritable podcast. My name is Luke.
I'm Richard, and I just got my master's degree in divinity.
Everyone has a different perspective, so we're bringing on all sorts of people from different walks of life, like Jewish, Buddhist, Christian, atheist, and more, to discuss the biggest spiritual and moral questions and how they see it in their philosophy.
Our goal is to find where we agree and disagree, and hopefully challenge ourselves to be better people in the process.
Together, we shall dive deeper and get weirder. Dope. Okay, so I'm gonna hit you right off the bat. You are at a thrift store and you stumble across a lamp, and you are like, oh, this is a sweet lamp. You rub it, boom, genie comes out. He pops out and he's like, not 3 wishes, you get 1 wish. You can get the answer to any metaphysical question out there. I will give you 1 true answer. What is your question?
So I can't wish for some sort of physical object or something. It has to be a question.
Yeah. It's an answer to a big question.
You know, I guess it would be, how can I convince my parents that I'm not crazy? How can I convince anyone that I'm not crazy? That's what I need to know, man.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I know that's not the best answer, but
no, that's a great answer.
On the spot. The struggle for me since starting deconstructing the religion that I was brought up in and figuring out what I believe on my own, the struggle has been dealing with loved ones who really love me, being convinced that I'm on my way to hell now, and having to try to convince them that I'm okay. It's not easy. It's not easy. And not only that, but even some people that I went to Bible college with, who now are sending me stuff asking, what the heck happened to me? So just kind of letting everyone know, hey, I'm fine. Don't worry about me.
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm figuring things out.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it sounds like you know a little bit of how to do that, but it's always hard to form that precisely to get that point across, like to have people actually receive that.
Yeah, it's something about evangelical culture. I don't know if you two were brought up in that as I was, but there's something about that creates a savior complex in some of us, where we think that we have all the answers and everyone else needs those answers or else they're doomed. So we are obsessed with the idea that we need to get them saved. And so there are some people who I can try to convince them, like, I'm doing fine, I'm okay, but they're so convinced already that they need to save me. It's just impossible to break out of that, And it took me a long time to deconstruct that for myself.
Yo, for sure. Yeah, it's a massive echo chamber in a lot of ways. Oh, and I also want to shout out to our audience. This is Joey Trieb. Trieb. How do you say your last name?
It's Trieb. You actually had it right the first
time.
Trieb.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very German.
Well, my mind always jumped to Joey Tribbiani from Friends, and I was like, Luke, you got to get that out of your mind. So Joey Trieb here from TikTok. He's a popular content creator talking a lot about Christianity and kind of but his experience of breaking away from evangelical Christianity and biblical literalism and kind of reinterpreting a lot of the context of the Bible and what it means to be a Christian day to day. So yes, Joey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And that is exactly what I hope to present myself as. It bothers me when I get misconstrued, and so I appreciate how you nailed that, because a lot of people just say, "Oh, he doesn't believe in anything anymore," or he's a heretic now.
It's so frustrating when people are so quick to write someone off for just one thing.
Oh, especially
you believe this little thing? Okay, well, you're done.
Oh yeah,
let's close that door.
Especially when it's like a 59-second video on TikTok. I mean, I can't state everything I believe in 59 seconds,
Right, and you can't do parts 1 through 24 for every little minute topic.
Exactly.
Flesh everything out.
Exactly, yeah.
Dude,
it often feels like people that care a lot about something are also often very defensive of it and quick to feel attacked or threatened. And it's, I don't know, something that I've enjoyed saying recently is, if I really believe that the truth that I am living my life by is God's truth, I think it can do a pretty good job protecting itself. Like I don't think it needs me to to crucify anyone who speaks against it. I think if it's true, it can stand on its own feet pretty well.
That's a great point. Absolutely. That's what I'm trying to accept as well. There is kind of a debating sort of tendency in me, though, where I just never shy away from it. Yeah. So I agree wholeheartedly with you that, I should just let things slide, but that's something I gotta learn, I think.
Well, it can be also hard to parse out like, oh, okay, I don't want to like slide into a straw man attack. I want to actually like address the content of what this person is saying, remove the vitriol from their tone, and just be like, okay, let's talk about the argument in of itself and not the hateful way that you spoke to me or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely learning that. Luckily, my friend and I are able to. We just actually today launched our podcast / YouTube channel. So we're able to get into a lot of that in more detail and flesh out some of our TikToks further on that.
Nice. Yeah. Delightful plug segue. Excellent.
Yes,
do you want a quick shout out the name of your podcast?
All Things Reconsidered. Check it out.
All Things Reconsidered. Nice. Congrats.
Thank you. It's a good
I love
name.
that. That's a good name.
Thanks. That's so funny because we could not agree on a name forever. Did it take you guys a long time to decide?
Yes.
Oh yeah, the first like 20 episodes of our podcast did not have a name, and it was like,
because we
still don't know the name, but it's a podcast. It's so tough.
Richard,
it's so tough.
we should hit him with your Satan question.
My Satan question.
Yeah, your Satan question, dude.
All right, so we have watched some of your TikToks and found quite a lot of enjoyment in the Pokemon related TikTok, and just. Oh, it's beautiful, but
I was dying. Like this dude's out there looking like the Tiger King talking about Pikachu's erect tail, and I'm losing my shit. I'm like, this is hilarious.
Ex-Evangelicals, does this person remind you of your parents?
Pokemon is a devil.
Why did our parents believe this? Because supposed ex-Satan worshippers told them so. People claiming to be ex-Satanists that got saved by Jesus were extremely popular in the church. They used their best-selling books and sold-out lecture circuit to stoke fear with unsubstantiated stories of having used to be a witch, wizard, vampire, or Illuminati member. Here's one such ex-Satanist warning parents about Pokemon.
A lot of things come over from the Orient. Pokemon get their power by supernatural occult ability. This game is a war designed to attack our children's minds. Do you notice any symbol up there that you've seen before? The spiral. And it stands for what? Male fertility. Now, he has 3 fingers. If they were the 3, on us, they'd be this. It means hail Satan. This is Misty. She's headstrong and stubborn, constantly arguing with Ash. Typical woman. Cute little Pikachu, and he's being energized by an energy ball, and his little satanic tail is really erect.
His satanic erect tail, don't forget.
Like this little ball of energy and his tail so erect. And I was like, this dude has some issues that he needs to work out in private before he can address anything publicly.
He really did. Yeah.
So, but the important question is, which Pokemon is most likely to lead our youth to Satan?
Oh man,
is it
that's
Mewtwo with his 3 fingers? Is it Pikachu with his sensuous tail?
Mewtwo's too obvious, I think.
So Mewtwo, yeah, he's kind of, but he actually in the first movie ends with that very moving little monologue of his. I don't really see him.
Yeah, he has the character arc there.
Yeah. So no, I think I would go with Mr. Mime because I just freaking hate Mr. Mime. He's disgusting. Frankly, I'm offended every time I see him, and I'd want my kids saying that. I mean, I'll just be honest.
In my mind, that is the only correct answer to this question. You thought it was open-ended, but I had a correct answer, and it was Mr. Mime.
Yeah, I was thinking like of a lot of legendaries and stuff, but I think I would be most afraid to be trapped in a room with Mr. Mime.
Mr. Mime
that could turn very quickly.
Yeah, Mr. Mime and Lickitung. That's just too much tongue, and I don't want that around.
The thing with Mr. Mime is, what is his personality? Like Articuno, I know what Articuno's vibe is. What is going on in Mr.
I
He's
think Mr.
unreadable.
Mime has a little trickster vibe. He's just a little mischievous. He's like raccoon energy, maybe, with more psychic ability.
How dare you say that about raccoons?
I'm trying to paint a more like cuddly picture of Mr. Mime.
Yeah, you paint Satan in a good light.
You know what's funny is the guy on that video is a dude named Mike Warnke. Have you guys heard about this guy?
No, Mike Warnke.
Yeah, so Mike Warnke, this dude is insane. He used to be a comedian and a Christian comedian, and then somewhere along his career, he decided, hey, you know what would be great for my career is if I started telling everyone that I used to be a Satanist and that I used to be like a high-ranking member of the Church of Satan and all this. So he puts out a book all about his testimony of having been a Satanist and then getting saved and now being a Christian. And he becomes a big deal. Like he gets a lecture circuit. His book is a bestseller. It actually became a thing that kicked off the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s. Well, a couple of journalists started looking into it, started piecing together a story, and completely, thoroughly debunked him. They put out a book called The Satan Seller, and absolutely decimated this guy. And just like that, he lost everything. He lost his whole career. Yeah, and I don't know what he's doing now, but he was just one of many. There's a whole fleet of these guys who like lied about being Satanists.
Well,
and
and what's hard
stories.
is like you can still debunk them afterward, but the damage has already been done in so many ways. Like not every single one of those people who bought the book or watched a video is gonna see the aftermath of what he's become. You know?
Exactly.
And even if you've already accepted that ideology as yours, you know, even if it's like, oh, but he was never part of it, they're like, yeah, but all of this other evidence isn't necessarily false because he was lying about one part of it.
Oh yeah,
you know,
they that's what they do. They compartmentalize the whole conspiracy. It's the same thing that Christian conspiracy theorists do today. You know, like a lot of the satanic panic fervor over thinking that Satan was trying to get us through Pokemon and Led Zeppelin, and thinking that daycares were secret underground child abuse rings. All of that just evolved to today's Christian conspiracies about like QAnon and stuff like that. And even when one of their people gets debunked, like you said, man, they just separate that and they don't think critically about the whole of it. They just say, well, that one guy was crazy. Okay.
Right. Or they cherry pick individual parts that do fit into their narrative to continue building down this awkward tree branch of conspiracy.
Right. Because every good conspiracy has some level of truth, some level of some truth it's based off of. So they go back to that and say, well, that's right. And we can prove that. So all of this, you know, it's sad.
Sorry, keep going.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, with Satanic Panic, what do you think the next iteration of that is? Like, we had listening to the Beatles backwards. We had Dungeons and Dragons, even Pokemon. Is there like a Gen Z or like even the next generation, like, watch out for how Satan's going to get your kids? Like, what is that today?
Well, I think I have a few answers for that, but if you're looking for like a pop culture thing like Pokemon, we just saw it with Lil Nas X's shoes. You know, people
true.
freaking out. Now I'll admit, like, yeah, he did clearly use satanic imagery. Like he wasn't shy about it. So it's
the
not
human
like,
blood in each shoe was a little disturbing.
Yeah, like it's not as if, you know, it's not as something as innocuous as thinking that Pikachu has a satanic erect tail. Okay,
Right.
It's a little like, at least you got a point, but still to say that like he's in league with the Illuminati and with the Satanists. You know, I saw one person claim that, this is so disgusting. I don't even know how much we want to go into detail about this kind of stuff, but I saw one person claim that like Lady Gaga is in the Illuminati. She's a part of child abuse rings. And that when she famously wore that dress that was made out of
dress,
the meat dress, that was actually human flesh.
Oh, gracious me!
And it sounds so nuts because it is, but like I actually know people who believe this stuff, and it's always Christians. You know,
That's wild.
Wait a minute. Aren't some of the pieces of meat on that dress just huge to be part of a human body?
I thought it was just like bacon. I thought you wrapped yourself in bacon.
Now I'm Googling images of her meat dress now.
You have to. I mean, some of these people just get so stuck in like an echo chamber. I think that's a term you used earlier. They get stuck in it, and they feed off of each other.
And it just seems like such a weird conversion process. Like, do people honestly think that someone watching Lil Nas X's video is going to go down a rabbit hole of converting to Satanism. One, do they even know what Satanism is? Because like the Church of Satan is a pretty harmless society overall.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're not
absolutely is.
really like violent in any way.
No, it goes
And
against
secondly,
one of their
or like
rules.
someone watching Lady Gaga, do they really think someone's going to research that and then go participate in a pedophilic ring? No.
Yeah, it's just sad, and we also see it in other toys. Another video I have out, not just about Pokemon. It showed some ministers talking about satanic imagery in toys like He-Man and Smurfs, and that's absolutely still going. We just saw, what was it, just a few months ago? People on Facebook and Instagram were all freaked out, mostly Christians, about a troll toy.
Was it? I didn't see this.
Yeah, so there's this troll toy, and it had a really poorly designed button placement, where it's supposed to sit. When it sits down, it presses a button that's on its bottom, like it's basically on its crotch. But when it's supposed to work so that when you sit it down, it makes a noise. But it just looks like you have a button on the crotch. It's just a bad design. But I'm okay with accepting that's a really poorly designed toy. These crazy conspiracy people say no, that was done on purpose to prep children to be okay with being abused. It's just
Yeah, I feel like so many of those things are just like the simplest explanation is usually the right explanation. Like that was just a very poor toy design. And
Yeah.
we don't need to go further than that.
exactly. I it's sad to see, but I have so many loved ones who get completely enthralled with the QAnon fervor.
Yeah.
That is so much, what is the satanic panic of today? It's that. If you look in like the history of satanic panics, if you can even call it that, you could go back to even like the Salem witch trial, or go back even further to some things that people said about early Christians or even anti-Semitic messages, where people in history have accused people that they don't like of basically murdering babies, of killing children, of abusing children. That's always been the thing. And you can follow that through history. Even in the Salem witch trials, they were an underground or a witch coven that was abusing children. And now today, or we had that in the 80s and 90s, a big part of the satanic panic was not just like Pokemon cards. It was the idea that daycares were running underground sex trafficking rings. And now we see that today with, it's all the liberals. The liberals have an underground sex trafficking ring. Hillary Clinton's a part of it. It's like we've changed the people we're blaming, but we don't actually change what we're blaming them for.
Yeah, but like the underlying like derivative content is always the same, which is it's weird. It's so weird.
I don't know what that says about human nature, why we are obsessed with, that, but
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one.
I feel like our podcast is just big about conspiracy theories at this point, Luke. Some of our most recent episodes have been around the stuff that happened at Waco, Texas, and talking to people that were involved in that, and a lot of.
I don't know how familiar you are with that.
I saw that you guys interviewed someone from that Branch Davidians, right?
Yes, we had Charles Pace on, who is the self-proclaimed leader of the Branch Davidians, and then we had David Thibodeau on. We haven't published that episode yet, so will be out by the time this episode airs, to kind of refute some of the things that Charles Pace said. He was one of the original survivors, and wrote the book that the series was based off of. So that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'll say that's really cool.
Yeah, he's a fascinating dude.
Yeah, I bet. It's interesting because I watched some of that. And it's so sad to say this, but a lot of what this guy was saying is stuff that I hear all the time from Christian conservatives.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's a Venn diagram where, Christian conservatives share so much in common with their beliefs with Branch Davidian guys.
Well, so I'd love to like ask you about your like that culture a little bit. So it seems like you've right now broken away from a lot of that fundamentalism and evangelical Christian culture. So were you raised in a very evangelical home? What was that like, and how did you what shook you out of that?
Yes, so I was raised charismatic. We were in the Church of God for a while, the Assemblies of God, non-denominational churches for a while, but it's all with that charismatic lens. So that's, speaking in tongues, prophesying, gifts of healing. It was normal to see people in my church fall out in the spirit or convulse on the ground. All of that was very normal to me. And I went to a Bible college right after high school.
Is this all out in Utah, you said?
Oh, no, I was in Missouri I've lived all over the place. So
Okay.
some of my childhood was here, some was there. But a lot of this was in Missouri. And then I went to a Bible college in Alabama. And, that's where I met my wife. And it's where I met my podcast co-host, who's one of my closest friends. So I'm very thankful for the time that I had there. But I don't believe that same way so much anymore. One nagging question kind of leads to another, and soon some things start to unravel. No one goes out looking for deconstructing Christianity. Nobody who's in a faith tries to deconstruct. It's just kind of something that happens to you, where you can't shake some questions anymore. And for
So
me,
what was it for you? Yeah.
well, it's kind of funny. I was a youth pastor in 2013 and 14. And 2014, I think it was the year that Neil deGrasse Tyson put out his show Cosmos. And I just turned it on. I thought it looked interesting. I wanted to learn about space. And accidentally stumbled into my first ever actually paid attention to education about evolution.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, as an adult, I went through school, and anytime they talk about evolution, I would tune it out. I remember I had tests about evolution, and I would I would purposefully fail the test by just writing Bible verses and all the questions.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, no, my family was stoked. They were proud.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny to admit it, but as an adult, I felt like I was almost sinning because it's if my pastor knew that I was learning about evolution.
No, for real. I think that's not embarrassing at all. I think that's really true.
Well, so that's where it started for me. So I started thinking, well, I'm sick of having to believe that every scientific expert in the world is out to get me and is lying to me. The thing about Bible literalism is that it forces you to believe that every expert opinion is completely sorry, my computer's doing stuff.
Oh no,
It forces you to believe that every expert opinion is wrong, and those experts are maybe even satanically motivated to deceive you.
Yeah,
And
it
so-
increases the us versus them sort of parallel.
Exactly. And that's why we have Christian conspiracy so bad today, is because they've trained themselves to doubt any expert opinion on anything. It's a death of expertise. So anyway, I got sick of that. And I was like, Neil deGrasse Tyson's making sense. Maybe there's some facts here. And so I started getting away from Bible literalism and creationism. And then what really took me over the edge was a lot of 2019 and 2020, really the Trump years. I don't know where your viewers stand politically, so I'm not going to go too far that way. But basically, for a lot of us Christians, watching the embrace that the evangelical church had of Donald Trump was something that was confusing, to say the least, for some of us.
Yeah. Sad
And-
for me.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I'm trying to be careful. I don't know where anybody
No,
stands
for sure.
that way, but yeah, it was just something that was hard for a lot of us to stomach, and that made no sense. And so that was very off-putting. And then you have things like theology that can be harmful, like the rapture or panel substitution, things that paint God out to be a monster. We start asking questions. I ask questions like, why is the Old Testament God so violent, but then Jesus is so loving? How does that work? How do I reconcile this? And the typical copy and paste fundamentalist answers weren't cutting it anymore. Usually they just told me to stop asking questions.
Really? You had that response?
Yeah, absolutely. People were telling me, oh, well, God works in mysterious ways, so you're just going to have to trust him. Or,
Blind faith, sort of?
yeah, blind faith, just accept it, stop asking questions about it. And the only thing that will, I'm super stubborn. If you tell me to stop asking questions, that's the worst thing to tell me. That's just gonna make me ask more questions. So it was kind of, like I said, one thing after the other. And eventually I landed comfortably where I'm at now. I'm still learning, still growing, but I haven't lost my faith. I still believe in Jesus. I still consider myself a Christian, but I don't believe the Bible is literal. I understand it as being different genres with allegory and metaphor and poetry.
Yeah, we're in the same boat there a lot.
Yeah, and I'm not a creationist, and I've rejected certain things like the rapture.
Yeah.
So a question about your biblical understanding. When you say you don't believe it's literal, are you saying that none of the stories are historically factual? Like Moses never lived and Jesus is not a real person, or?
Well, I definitely believe Jesus was a real person. I have no issue with the historical Jesus in that sense. But yes, a lot of the Old Testament especially is some verbal tradition and some creation myth. A lot of it is written in a genre called ancient Near Eastern literature or ancient Near Eastern myth. And if we look at the writings of the Old Testament, especially in that genre, and we compare it to writings similar to it of that region and of that time, you'll see a lot of similarities that pop up in that genre. And basically, a very factual, literal way of writing and describing events was just not what the authors were trying to do. So when we approach that ancient text with our expectations of it, this is going to be like an archaeological reading. This is going to be like a history textbook. We're actually approaching it with wrong expectations and forcing it to be something it's not. So no, to answer your question, a lot of the stories I think are maybe allegorical or even embellishments or creation myth, but they're not always completely literal history. Like there's no archaeological evidence that Joshua ever existed, for instance. And I'm okay with that because I read the books. I try to read the books with a spiritual understanding rather than a literal one. So instead of reading Joshua and saying, okay, so God literally told a literal dude to go and commit a literal genocide. Instead of thinking that, I say, okay, well, this is communicating a spiritual truth. This is showing how badly man can misinterpret the voice of God and how we can act in violence when we think that God is behind us. But then we compare that to Jesus when he says, I never told you to do that. I'm saying love your enemies. So
Yeah.
I try to read it spiritually instead of literally.
Joe, you better be careful. We're gonna low key swing you over to our side of religion here. So you better watch where you're going. And I I don't want to condemn people or anything like that, but to me, I'm so repulsed by the conservative or not conservative, just I don't want to paint pictures, but of the religious standpoint of the desire for a warrior prince god, like someone to come in and cut and slash and burn down the enemies and send people to hell. Like this is just such an anti-Jesus picture that is a frightening reality that people want this to happen, that people wish for harm and eternal torment on their enemies. Like what kind of a group of God's people is that? Like, that's so scary to me. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, man. It's so sad that is it's our human nature. And the sad thing is that that's how it's always been. If you look at, when Jesus rode in on a donkey, they were chanting Hosanna, which means save now. They were literally hoping and excited for his arrival because they thought he was about to go and start a war.
People were disappointed in his pacifism.
Exactly. They wanted him to take up a sword and charge into battle. That's why they said save now. But he subverts our violent expectation. And I think he's still doing that because we still have Christians, like you said, who imagine him as this William Wallace or Rambo type, Although he said on the Sermon on the Mount, although he taught us in his ministry and life to love your enemy and to turn the other cheek. Oh, well, this time though, he's coming back with an AK-47, because he just totally.
So I get where people are coming from then of they've read the Old Testament. God is a vengeful God in the Old Testament. Like there's a lot of big epic things happening. So I can see their expectation of wanting that warrior God to come down and save them. But then we get this narrative of Jesus being the complete opposite and subverting all these expectations. So I'm confused of people in 2021 wanting still that same God to return and rapture and burn, when the answers to me feels like it's already been there, of like, that's not how God's coming back to us.
Yeah, well, it goes.
So
down
where do
to,
they get that?
Well, I think it goes. That's a great question, and that right there, I think, is the best summary of why people are deconstructing. Deconstruction, as I'm sure you guys are well aware, is an extremely popular phrase right now. A lot of people in our generation are deconstructing their faith, and what you just described, I think, is one of the major reasons. Is how do we reconcile the violence of the Old Testament with the loving Jesus of the New, and then the seemingly return to violence of Jesus in Revelation. The way I see it is that when you read the Old Testament violence, and then you keep reading and you get to Jesus with his love, and not only that, but he says, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He said, and Hebrews says that he is the image of the invisible God. So Jesus is our picture of what the Father is like. The Father is like Jesus. So if God is saying in the New Testament to love your enemies, why was he violent? To me, there's only really two options. Either God used to be violent, and then he deconstructed, read a Rachel Held Evans book, and decided to become nonviolent. Or the other option is that maybe the people who wrote him as violent didn't really know him that well yet because they didn't have Jesus. Paul says that I wish I could give the actual verse, but to summarize, he says that to try to find God in the Old Testament is like looking at God with a veil in front of your face or through a glass dimmed darkly. So you basically, if you have a veil in front of your face, you can basically see out images, you can see a foggy idea of who's there. But Jesus comes and removes that veil and says, I am the Father, or when you see me, you've seen the Father, rather. So the Old Testament didn't have Jesus. So they only saw a foggy idea of who God was. And I guess they did their best, but they were influenced by their culture. It's not till Jesus comes along that we see the fullness of what God is like.
Yeah, I think very well said. And I'm very comfortable with the phrase Jesus equals Jehovah. That the Trinity, when the Trinity is talked about, it is symbolically talking about different aspects of God, not different people. In the same way that I can be both a father and a son, right? If I have kids, I am a father and a son. And so it's talking about different spiritual aspects, different qualities of one God.
Yeah, that's definitely a different flavor from our religion than a lot of other Christianity.
But I think a lot of this separation of, in my opinion, this separation of people of God, the three persons of the Trinity, I think a lot of that makes it more comfortable to see a return to the violence of the Old Testament in rapture and things like that, right? So there was the Father who was in the Old Testament who was violent. The Son came, but now, they're going to come again. God is going to come again, and it's going to be violent again because we've separated out. So now we can have both of those attributes living with each other, living equally. But if it's in one person, that's impossible to reconcile.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Honestly, the Trinity is not something that I have done a whole lot of personal study on just yet, but that is very interesting. I'll have to look into that. What's something I can read about that? Do you have a book recommendation?
Yes, I have plenty of book recommendations. So our religion is based a lot on revelatory teachings of this guy Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a 18th century scientist turned theologian, who a lot of his theology is trying to bring understanding to a Christianity that he saw as missing the point. So a lot of, especially his, the analysis of Revelation is analysis of the harm to Christianity that like Catholicism at the time and Lutheranism at the time was doing. He's got a ton of books, and a lot of them are a ton of volumes. If you're in for an easier read,
Okay.
Introductory.
That's not meant as an
book.
insult. I just wanna
No,
say.
no.
We're just like, with your puny little mind, if you want an easy read.
The book Heaven and Hell is just him talking about visions of heaven that he got and visions of hell and what heaven and hell are like.
Okay.
And it's pretty wild. He also wrote a book called True Christianity, that's talking about here's what Christianity should be. Here's who God is. Here's tenets of what Christian life should be. He also wrote a book
we
called
can send more book recommendations later. We should get
Yeah,
back
you're right,
to
you're
what,
right.
what
I'm geeking
listeners
out
want to
about
talk about.
Um,
Well, no, you did mention Heaven and Hell, though, which is what I wanted to bring up with you, Joey, because I binged all your TikToks.
Oh, wow.
And
man.
it was a fun day. You know, I was scrolling through. I was like, hey, this is work for me. This is fun.
wow. That was a very Luke sentence. This is work for me. This is fun.
Hey, that's how life should be, baby. If you don't love your work, what you doing? So you have talked a lot about biblical literalism and like specific Bible passages and rapture and stuff, but you haven't talked much about the afterlife, which I feel like is a huge like Christian concept. And so I'm wondering what your current views are on the afterlife as it stands right now. Like you talked a little bit about hell in your most recent TikTok posts. But yeah, what do you think happens when we shed this mortal coil?
I am still of the mind that, like Paul said, to be absent of body is to be present with the Lord. The problem is, I think the church has gotten a little off track by focusing too much on this idea of leaving Earth into one of two destinations, heaven or hell. When I think the early church understood that really the narrative, the story of the Bible, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, the story of the Bible is about heaven coming to earth, not about us leaving. The whole idea is to have a return to Eden. In Eden, it was like you have heaven and earth, and the two realms were overlapped. But then with sin, those realms split apart, and they were separated. Immediately after that, well, not immediately, but soon after that, Abraham and all them, with Moses, they made tabernacles. And in those tabernacles, that was a small area on earth where there was that overlap once again, where heaven and earth were one once again in the Holy of Holies. And then later in history, they had the temples that were the same thing. Well, once we eventually get to Jesus, John looks at Jesus and says, here is, I'm paraphrasing again, but he says, this is God among us, God among men. He's describing him like the temple. He's basically saying what we had in the temple is now walking around in a body, Mm-hmm. And so Jesus was that connection of heaven to earth. Well, now as Christians, I believe we're meant to be bringing heaven to earth. That's what Jesus told us to pray, is that thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So I think of the afterlife not so much in us leaving, although I do believe when you die, you are present with the Lord. He said, you'll be with me today in paradise, to the thief on the cross. But that's not the end goal. We're not just like going up there to get a mansion and never have to, do anything.
Eternal prayer or whatever.
Right. The end goal that I see the early church believing was for the return of these two realms, where heaven comes to earth, where God is among us. That's why they called him Emmanuel, God among us. That was the good news, that God was among us. There's my kid coming in.
Oh my goodness, can we say hi?
Sure.
Sorry, we can cut this part if we want.
No.
Oh, hey cutie, how are you?
Say hi.
We got the red hair gang. Let's
Yes,
go.
yes.
Yeah.
Say hi. Aren't you supposed to be napping? I'm sorry, guys.
No, don't apologize. I'm mad jelly of the overalls. I've had 2 pairs of overalls in my Amazon wish list that I've been meaning to buy.
Oh, nice. Yeah, she's got plenty. I'll screw up the edit.
No, dude, you're fine.
Okay.
It's cute seeing your little family.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, say hi again. Okay. I'm gonna go give her to her mom. I'll be right back.
Yeah, pop on back. Take your time. Aw, that's cute.
I was going to ask what her opinions about the afterlife are.
So, Thessalonians, what do you think? Anyway, so I wanted to get back into it here. So, you were talking a lot about, kind of bringing heaven on earth and that kind of thing. And it's an interesting phrase because in our church, we kind of have a small tweak to that, which is that, in the Lord's Prayer, like as in heaven, so upon the earth, on earth as in heaven, however you want to phrase it. We believe that sort of call to action is that we right now are creating eternity. We are creating heaven right now. We can choose to be in heaven right now, and we are trying to create that on earth by doing good things, by loving the Lord, by loving love, by treating people well. We are bringing heaven down on earth, and that action combined with faith and belief in God, in Jesus, I'll even be so froofy as to just say in love in general, that is what is creating heaven on earth for us. And we have a very kind of defined model of what heaven and hell are like, and that how we live our life now directly creates our afterlife, or creates who we are once we pass away. Like, we are these souls that we are forming with every choice that we make on earth. And that's kind of the point of earth, is to create who we are.
That's really interesting. And yeah, that is very similar to where I stand as well. Because I do believe, like you're saying, that we create essentially pockets of heaven, that is what I think should be the goal of the church, is to, well, Paul, when he's writing in one of his books, might have been Thessalonians where he says this, but he describes being a citizen of heaven. And he says, remember that your citizenship is in heaven. Now, some people read that and they say, okay, so that means I'm not actually from this planet. I don't have to care about this planet because I'm not a citizen of earth. I'm a citizen of heaven. So I'm going to get out of here and go to heaven. That's not what Paul meant at all. He was referring to the Roman practice, where as Rome spread its empire and it took over little provinces, little cities, it would infuse that city with the nature of Rome, with iconography, or with statues, or with the religious practices,
the cultural practices,
the culture. Yeah, it would infuse that new city with the culture of Rome. And so when people would leave to other cities, they would bring the culture of where they're really from with them. So Paul's not saying, don't worry about earth, you're about to leave. He's saying, invade earth with the culture of your home, which is heaven. So
Amen.
How do we do that?
I like it.
Yeah, so how do we do that? We do that through love. What is the culture of heaven? The culture of heaven is love and forgiveness and self-sacrifice and reconciliation. And so when we are walking in those things, we are invading earth with the culture of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
And I'm vibing on that hard, because I feel like the whole what would Jesus do got so spun out of what it means, because Jesus was having dinner with people from all walks of life. He was being selfless and volunteering and sacrificing himself. And I think we have so many Christians closing the doors on different points of view and not inviting in all these people to dine together and talk together, which is the point of, I get so jazzed about that.
Jesus was radically inclusive. He would let anyone.
Yeah.
My favorite parable from Jesus is when he's describing a feast, and this rich guy is putting on the feast, and he has all his servants help set it up and everything, and then nobody shows up who was invited. So he tells his servants, go out into the streets and pull in anyone. The people I invited didn't show up, so just go pull in anyone. And so the servants run out, they grab anyone they can, and they bring them in, and they say, come and sit with us, feast next to us. Here, pull up a chair next to me, sit. That, I think, is what the church should be doing. Bringing in everyone and saying, there's a spot for you at the table. No matter what you're going through in life, or what your nationality is, or your ethnicity, or your orientation, come and pull up a chair.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting. We were talking about Jesus riding into Jerusalem and people thinking he was going to throw out the Romans, but then the first place he went was the temple to say how much they were messing everything up. And the people he's most aggressive toward, if you want to say aggressive, is the Jewish population, the us. And I see it as such an analogy for, it's easy for us to say, I have these teachings, you're doing it wrong, and point a finger, instead of saying, I have these teachings, how am I doing it wrong? To look inside instead of outside with what the Lord says, to make it about our personal growth instead of about what we are trying to force on others.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the same, this idea of creating heaven on earth, the same really could be said about hell. That, there's kind of two different interpretations of hell that I'm jumping between right now and trying to figure out where I stand.
Okay.
But one fits in perfectly with what you guys are saying, which is that hell is something that we create. Basically, one guy I love, Tim Mackey, who does the Bible Project, he describes it this way. He says that, in Genesis it says God created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't say God created the heavens, the earth, and hell. So where did hell come from? Well, then he jumps to a verse in James that says, your words, your tongue is inflamed with the fires of hell. And so he makes the argument that we create hell through our words and through our actions, that we've actually created hell on earth. And that people right now are in hell on earth. People who are in war zones or who are, impoverished or whatever it might be, that they're going through a hell right now that we're supposed to be, bringing Jesus to. So that's one idea of hell that I like. It kind of disagrees with the other one, but it's a good one.
Just to inform you of our idea, that is one of my favorite ideas in my faith practice, is that heaven and hell is totally a personal choice, in this life and in the next. That there's no like, ooh, I hope I make it to heaven. Like, if you are a person that loves heaven and what heaven is, that's where you'll be forever. But if you're a person that loves selfishness and loves evil and loves hurting people, you won't be there.
And that's not what you'll like. That's not what you're going to love. Like, you wouldn't enjoy heaven even.
You'll be miserable there. And so hell is actually a creation of mercy, not of punishment. That like, oh, there are people that didn't do this right, and it's not fair. Our faith values freedom a lot. Like, people's spiritual freedom is the most important thing. And so it wouldn't be fair of God to be like, ooh, I'll just change you to be a good person, because then we're just robots and our sentience means nothing.
Yeah.
So he's like, in mercy, there needs to be a place where these people can live.
Yeah.
Because they're miserable in heaven, and that's the existence of hell. And
that makes a lot of sense.
But I want to get into an idea that comes up in Christianity a lot, and as a faith practice that sees a lot of a spiritual interpretation of the Bible instead of a literal one. A criticism that I get a lot is, well, you're just picking and choosing.
Yeah.
Like, you're just picking and choosing what you
what
like.
works for you.
Yep.
And you're ignoring the hard stuff where Jesus is trying to draw a hard line. You're living easy Christianity.
Yep.
And what do you do with that? What do you do with the idea that, oh, you're just making it say what is comfy for you? You're making it say what you want it to say.
Yeah.
And those sorts of criticisms.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of try a lot of different things. One thing I try to do is first point out that I'm only trying my hardest to read the Bible how the authors intended. So if that comes away with a more spiritual interpretation than literal, that's not because I want to take an easy route and I'm avoiding literal. It's because I believe that that's what the authors intended for us to read it like. And I think there's a lot of evidence for that. The other thing I try to point out to them is that no one really follows Bible literalism perfectly. Every one of us, I mean, there are still some denominations that don't allow women to preach. That's still a big thing. But speaking from my own charismatic upbringing, that was never a thing that we worried about. We had women pastors and women preachers all the time. So you're already not following Paul completely literally, because he says that that's not okay. A true Bible literalist would have to not be okay with that. So I kind of put it back on them, like, hey, aren't you picking and choosing there too?
Or like, let's look at Leviticus and the teachings on if a child strikes their parents, they are to be put to death. Has your daughter ever hit you?
Oh yeah, of course, it's a problem.
Well, why are you letting that stand? Capital punishment.
Right. A lot of times they'll come back with, oh, well, that's the old covenant. Now we're under a new covenant. But what they forget is that in the new covenant, Paul did not denounce slavery. I wouldn't necessarily say that Paul's verses on slavery were encouraging slavery, but it certainly wasn't denouncing it either. And those verses where Paul talks about slavery were weaponized by slaveholders to justify what they were doing. So
I mean, the Bible's been weaponized left and right for all sorts of things.
That's one of the reasons why a starkly literal translation is so dangerous. It makes the Bible into weapons. You can make the Bible be whatever you want it to be, essentially. And if I'm doing that too, I don't think that's what I'm doing. But if I'm doing that, at least I'm erring on the side of inclusiveness and love, and not weaponizing it. And if that is a problem for some people, then it's a problem. But what can I say?
I think you made a really good point that engaging with the Bible totally literally doesn't protect you from reading your bias into Scripture, right? It doesn't protect you from your false interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because clearly throughout history, people have picked and chosen, even among literalists, the teachings that they wanted to support their way of life.
Oh, absolutely. And I just think that it's being dishonest to the text. I've been told that I am dishonoring the Bible by simply saying things like that Jesus isn't coming back to kill us all. And what I'm trying to point out to people is that forcing the Bible to be something it's not, that's how you dishonor it. That's what's dishonoring the Bible.
Yeah. I think what frustrates me from a macro perspective on all this is that to someone new approaching all this stuff, my wish and hope is that religion didn't need so much breakdown and comparison and academic study for someone to understand something. Like, I'm just saddened by the state of Christianity in general, that things are so polarized and different and combative for someone to try to wade through. Like, that's asking for so much initial buy-in and like pulling apart of all these different things that are happening for someone to get something useful out of the religion. So when I'm trying to picture like the future of how people can approach Christianity, it just seems so bleak and sad to me when there's so much to wade through and deconstruct to buy into something that could be beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I mean, it's not an easy process. But I think that for one, like, look at it this way. When we were in high school, we had to have a teacher explain Shakespeare to us because it was hard to understand. And the Bible is a whole lot older. So, it's not easy. And it's just because of the time, That's why community is so important. That's why the church is so important, because we can't do this alone. We need podcasts like yours to help people
and
ask
yours,
the right
my
questions.
friend.
Oh, thank you. To help people ask the right questions and to give book suggestions like you've suggested yours, and I would suggest anything by Brian Zahn. That's
I'll
what
look him
helps,
up. Yeah, you mentioned Tim Mackey and Brian Zahn.
Yes, those two guys are very. They've helped me a lot.
That's cool.
Yeah. So have you found in the content that you've put out, what has been a lot of your feedback? Because I don't know. I'm someone that tends to be very spiritually curious. And when someone says something, especially in the realm of Christianity, that I haven't heard before, apart from whether I believe it or not, I'm very interested to hear what they have to say. I'm excited to see another look at something, whether it makes me adopt it as my own or better understand my position in opposition, not necessarily, but next to their position. How much have you found curious engagement, and how much have you found stubborn and accusational,
vitriolic and hateful accusation?
Well, yeah, you get some of both for sure. But for me, it has luckily been more of the supportive side. I have gotten plenty of angry comments from fundamentalist Christians, but mostly it's been supportive. Though they outweigh it. I've gotten a lot of really fantastic responses. Like especially when I was going after the Rapture. The Rapture is so fun for me to take pot shots at because it's like so not biblical that I have no fear of being a heretic by attacking it, because it's like we literally made this up. It's not in
Yeah,
the
it's from a
Bible.
dream from one person that has evolved in so many ways.
Exactly. So like it's fun to just kind of, take some shots at that. But when I was talking about that, a lot of people were reaching out, not only in comments, but I have tons of private messages that I have to catch up on actually, of people saying that it really helped them because, and I'm not saying this like, for myself, but I just think that the rapture is one example of a very toxic and dangerous theology that some people have been honestly traumatized by. I get stories all the time of people saying, "Oh, I came home from school early one day and my mom was out on a walk, but I didn't know where she was, so I started freaking out and thought that I was left behind." I mean, I get stories like that all the time. So I get a lot of support. But yes, I do get called a heretic basically every day. There's this one, I'm not going to name him, but there's this one fairly prominent Christian TikToker who has set his sights on me and just like has for video after video gone after me.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, dude.
Is he a more evangelical edge?
He's a fundamentalist.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a fundamentalist, and he really just loves the rapture. So he's so yes, I get plenty of hate as well.
Do you find that a lot of the like more hateful comments, are they usually already entrenched in their own idea about things and unwilling to hear a different perspective? Or what percentage of those are people who are, start confrontational and then come to understanding?
Oh, definitely the majority are people who are very close-minded. I've had some people who started confrontational, and then like I backed up. I was like, no, that's not exactly what I meant. I only have 59 seconds. Here's more of what I actually meant to say. And they're like, oh, okay, I understand. That does happen. But most of the time, they just come in with like one quick thing of, you're wrong. That's not what that says. This is heresy. You're leading people to hell. And then I come back and I say, hey, I'm just saying what like ancient church fathers in the first few centuries said. I'm not making this up. And it doesn't work. They stay, it kind of wraps all the way back to how I started this with you guys, talking about how, I have people in my family and loved ones who they're so convinced of their way of thinking that they think any deviation is essentially a ticket to hell.
Damnation. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like we can't even hold different theological opinion because they think that they have the monopoly on all religious truth. And so even the slightest theological change is like, I don't know, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And then their savior complex kicks in. So now they can't admit that I'm making a good point. They can't admit that maybe that's something to think about. They can't say anything like that because their savior complex has kicked in and now they're just trying to rescue me.
Yeah. I do want to reach out with consolation for that because I just really feel you, man. And that must be such a difficult emotional place to be in with people that are so close to you. Like, and I appreciate you divulging that and telling us a little bit because I have some of the same stuff in my peripheral family, and it's a constant struggle. And I worry about the spiritual, ramifications of that. And that's just so hard to deal with. So, man, I feel you, and I really feel for you.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to navigate by any means.
No, not fun at all.
Yeah. But what can I do? I mean, we're just on this deconstruction journey, and sometimes it's not easy, but sometimes it's a lot of fun.
There's an idea that I really like in the new church about moving from what it calls historic faith to true faith.
Okay.
And it basically a process that involves generally a lot of doubt, a lot of, thinking and pondering about, is this real? Did what I grow up being taught, is that actually what's real, or is my faith different than that? And just how that's a really essential part of spiritual journeys. And it strikes me as so sad how often I see people trying to stifle that process, because I mean, we can pledge allegiance to a faith practice that we believe full-heartedly is true because maybe we've never analyzed it deeply and how it should really be affecting our lives and our spiritual growth and what is working for us and what feels like the Lord's presence in our lives. But naturally transitioning to something more alive, a more living faith is going to involve bumps and critical thinking and doubt and maybe times of distance from your faith. And all of that is natural. And the more we try to stifle that, the more we bottle up something that is only bound to explode and push people away from faith entirely and forever, right? Because they're like, oh, I guess faith is that thing that I have to blindly believe as true, and it restricts my life, and I don't see its use because no one ever let me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very well said. I agree. I think that goes right in line with one of my favorite things to say on our show, which is that, basically fundamentalism lays out certain aspects of faith and theology that they say are fundamental. You have to believe these things because they're fundamentals. And if you don't hold them, you're not saved. And so I love to point out with various theologies, that's actually not a fundamental. You don't have to believe it, you know? It's okay to think differently. The church has been terrified of questions, and it has shut down difference of opinion. It has shut down difference of theology. And I'm just trying to show people it's okay to disagree. It's okay to work out your own salvation, as the Bible says, and to wrestle with Scripture like Jacob, you know?
So when you were in that process, and it sounds like not too long ago, I'm impressed that, when you were taking out the bricks of this, that the whole figurative building didn't collapse on you. So what kept it from collapsing, or was there a time where it was really hard for you to maintain your faith?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there was a period of time where it became challenging. I never did fully give up faith, though, or fully become like an atheist or anything.
Sure.
But there definitely was a period of time where it was challenging to keep believing. But for me, what kept bringing me back to Jesus was the beauty of the gospel and of what he did on the cross. When you get away from this idea that this penal substitution idea that God is just so mad and he just wants to kill everybody, but then Jesus steps in and he takes a punishment for us, and now we don't have to. That idea that creates a monstrous idea of God the Father, of being this vindictive, punitive, angry God that just wants to kill someone. I got away from that and accepted a different view of atonement that was more of that the cross was God defeating death itself. That Jesus loves us so much that the cross is not what Jesus endured by God. The cross is what God was willing to endure for our sake. It wasn't what he had. It wasn't what God did to him. It's what we did to God, and yet he still loved us. And that radical forgiveness and love, like that, just draws me. I'm moved by that.
Yeah, man, I'm moved by what you're saying. That's beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you.
Really, I truly mean that.
One thing I like to say is that God didn't die for us; He lived for us, and that all of Jesus's life was Him trying to save us. Right, the establishment of all the new truth, the establishment of Christianity and a new way of understanding things, and his battle against hell through the temptations that he went through, that are mentioned explicitly in his temptations in the wilderness and in Gethsemane and on the cross. But also, I think, temptations through his whole life against just kind of the power of evil and how prevalent evil had become in the world and in people's lives. And so the cross was, I see it as a final temptation where, yes, he could have And you know, you see that people mocking him on the cross, being like, oh, well, if you're the Son of Man, just come down off the cross and all of that. And again, getting back to this idea of freedom, if he had, you know, floated down off the cross and smote the person saying that, it wouldn't have provided us with, first of all, the freedom to believe or not. And second of all, the understanding of who he really is as a loving God that, like you said, is willing to go through anything for our happiness and salvation.
And to convince us that he loves us. I love what you're saying, man. The way that I see it, oh good, my camera refocused. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what I was doing that. But anyway, the way I see it is that Jesus on the cross had the opportunity to be exactly what the Old Testament tells us God is. He right there could have been exactly what Joshua thought God was, what Moses thought God was, what David thought he was, and struck down his enemies. He could have called down fire. He could have killed them all. But instead he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And when he said those words, the monstrous God of the Old Testament was completely done away with. I think that right there was the death of a monster idea of God. Not that God ever was that. Let me be careful. I don't think God ever was that. I think that people in the Old Testament misunderstood who God was. And Jesus, when he said that, when he said forgive them, he forever put to rest this bad idea you guys had about him, or that we had about him. You know what I mean?
Which is why his final words in John were, "It is finished."
Exactly. And so what he shows us is that while Joshua told us that God will kill his enemies, Jesus shows us that God would rather die than kill his enemies. And that's why I stayed a Christian.
Well said.
Guys, I am hyped right now. I'm so full of life and love. This is... No, I like Joey, that the way you put that of the choice that Jesus had to fulfill this Old Testament, I had never framed it like that, and that's gonna stick with me. I think that's really so important.
Cool. Well, thank you. I'm so glad. You know, honestly, I can't take full credit. I have a fantastic church. My pastors taught me a ton, and that line I just gave you about he would rather die than kill his enemies, that's a direct quote from Brian Zond. It's not mine.
Hey, well, way to pay it forward.
Yeah.
All right. I have been itching to bring something up, but our conversation was too good. Getting back to the idea of rapture and literalism. Have you heard of the website? One of my favorite websites. And maybe I go to this website from a cruel place, but
okay.
It's called raptureready.com. Have you heard of this website?
I'm about to go to it right now.
It has my favorite part of it. It has a rapture index where it gives you an index rating of how quickly we're approaching the rapture. And based on topics such as a false Christ rating, an occult rating, a Kings of the East rating, a Mark of the Beast rating, a Gog in parentheses Russia rating, a Persia, and in parentheses Iran rating.
No, we can't do that.
A liberalism rating.
Oh, those evil liberals. They're gonna... You know what's funny? Oh my God, I have so many thoughts about this, but you know what's really funny?
Yeah, free healthcare isn't the sign of the beast. I don't know what is. Sorry.
No, that's a great point. It's just so funny to me because, like, if liberals really were actively bringing about revelation and the end times the way that they say, then shouldn't we be happy about that? Don't we want Jesus to come back? I mean, if you stop them, wouldn't that
That's an
stop
interesting
the prophecy?
way of looking at it, actually.
It's like people are so obsessed with finding the Antichrist, which for one is based off a total misunderstanding. The only time the words Antichrist are used in the entire Bible is in 1st and 2nd John, and he always described it as a spirit and as a plural, meaning it's a spirit that could be in lots of people. But yet we're so hung up on this idea that it's one person, and people have said it's
Barack Obama, Hillary
Clinton, even Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Wilson Reagan, all three names have 6 letters. So they said that he was it. Yeah, right. I've seen people say that what was it, the prince who just died in England? I'm not.
Oh yeah, Charles or
Yeah, they took like the day of his death and they flipped the numbers around and it kind of looked like 666 and they said he's the Antichrist. But anyway, it's stupid. But my point is, we're so obsessed with finding the Antichrist, but what are we going to do if we find him? Kill him? If we did that, wouldn't that stop the prophecy? Like, wouldn't that kind of ruin
what
it?
an interesting way to flip the script on a little bit. Like, shouldn't we be welcoming, like, if all these people are excited about, the rapture or being raised up, shouldn't we be welcoming in what's going to enable that to happen?
Yeah, and that's exactly why the rapture gets us to be so disinterested in this world. Not only are we thinking that, well, I leave the earth and go to heaven, instead of thinking that heaven comes to earth and that we get to join with God in new creation, just like Adam was supposed to. Not only do we miss that, but now we add the rapture onto it and we think, hey, all these problems, we're just going to leave. So not our problem.
Yeah.
Which, how worthless is the church if our response to the problems of the world is, well, we're about to leave, so that's your problem.
I'm just gonna moonwalk out at all these problems.
And it's coming soon because our rapture index is at 188, and anything above 160 is labeled "fasten your seatbelts."
Oh my god! Well, that's exciting, you guys. I mean,
fasten your seatbelts.
Maybe I'm wrong, and things are about to get really cool, but maybe Kirk Cameron was on to something.
Not really cool for you and me because we're gonna be left behind.
Yeah.
Oh, listen. I'm not getting chopped. Okay. Have you guys seen A Thief in the Night?
No. What's that?
Oh my God. So A Thief in the Night is like the precursor movie series to Left Behind. It was Left Behind before there was Left Behind.
Was that one of your earlier TikToks?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think I watched that one.
Oh my God, it's traumatizing. They show people getting their heads chopped off in a guillotine because they refuse to take the mark of the beast.
Oh, but that's family friendly. Don't you worry about that.
Oh yeah. Can't watch Harry Potter, but here's someone getting their head chopped off in a guillotine, laying on their backs. They're looking up at it. It's terrifying.
Yep.
That's the kind of stuff that we watch. But sorry to cut you off, but just
no.
This was in the middle of 2020, so it's in the middle of all of the racial tension that we were in, and of course the pandemic. And I had my radio on scan while I was driving, and it just randomly landed on a Christian talk show that I stopped on because I wanted to hear what their answer was, where somebody called in and they said, what's your response to all of the stuff going on in the world right now? The riots and the racial tension and the violence and the pandemic. What's your response? And so I stopped it to hear what the guy said. And he said, and this is a pastor on a radio show. He said, it's times like this that we have to remember that we're not of this world and we're about to leave and it will be all better once we get into heaven. And I had to pull over. I was so pissed. I was like, that's the church's response? We have people dying in the streets. We have people who are getting killed and their video shared across the internet and the cops still may be getting away with it at the time. And yet your response is, well, sucks, but we're about to leave.
But Joey, remember, it's young people's fault for not joining the church, okay?
Oh,
They're
right.
the ones who need to change, okay? They are wrong for not wanting to be a part of what we have to offer.
That's that. You know what? You got me there. Hey, you guys made this problem.
But you're touching on such a critical issue that fills me with rage and passion. I'm not sure what percentage of what, but it's so frustrating to me that so much of the solution seems to be to remove ourselves as Christians from things.
Yes.
When Jesus was all about getting involved, doing the nitty gritty, being action oriented. And people are always talking about how do we reach a new generation of believers? How do we get more people in church or whatever? It's it's not about forcing them to believe things. To me, it's like plank in the speck type of teaching. We need to figure out our own stuff and get back to what we can do as Christians to involve ourselves in the world and help push things and change things and love people and fix places and provide shelter for the homeless or just do acts of kindness and selflessness to promote Christianity, because that's what I think it makes it beautiful. But we remove ourselves from this, and I don't understand why.
Well, we have been completely enraptured with the idea that the church is, thank you, with the idea that the church is on a retreat. That's our idea. It's escapism, When the rapture first spread in America, well, when it first came over, it wasn't immediately accepted. But when it started to really take off, it was right in the middle of things like World War One and the Spanish flu, and the Great Depression later. And so I think things like that created a desire for escapist theology. And let's be honest, there's still that desire now because we just got through 2020. Escapist theology had its moment once again, I think. People want to just be told, you're getting out of here. But you're absolutely right. We're supposed to be focused on how we can improve and bring heaven to earth now.
Yeah. And I think I see, sorry, Ray, I just want to say real quick. I think I see a lot of people, you know, it's almost like an analogy of a mentor-mentoree or parent relationship where I'm like, hey, can you help me, please? Like, we're struggling here. And I feel like the church at B or whatever the institution is like, no, we can't dirty our fingers. We don't want to displease anyone, perchance. So we will remain here where it's safe and where we don't have to engage with anything difficult. Good luck.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, this is our chance to engage with people when they need help more than ever.
Exactly.
Sorry, Richard. Just felt like I needed to get that out there.
I think well said. My wife said something recently that I thought was wise when we were talking about history, because on top of being a minister, I'm also currently teaching history. You know, I was talking about how much do you teach history with a political slant, or with political implications, and how much do you teach it kind of more straight factual and allow children to, as they grow up, understand that whole conversation. And she said, anyone who studies history and doesn't have their politics and life changed because of it is studying history wrong.
Oh, that's a great line.
And
wow.
I immediately thought of it in terms of theology. You know, anyone who studies theology or church history and doesn't have their politics and way of life changed because of it is doing it wrong. And I get the reason why a lot of churches try to stay out of politics.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to be like, we're a church with a political stance and also we're open for everyone. Yeah. And with numbers dwindling in a lot of churches, it's tough to be like, and we're going to make part of the people that come here feel isolated politically. So I get all that. But as a Christian, apart from organizational questions, but as a religious person, my faith, I think, should drive me to be the most involved.
Yeah.
Right? I should look at people that don't have my ideas and say, well, that might be why they're less involved than I am. Not that might be why they're more involved than me.
Right.
Right?
Right. That's a great point. I love that. Yeah, there's no way you can escape the politics of Jesus. And I don't think that the politics of Jesus perfectly lines up with either of our two major parties in every way. But as a Christian, if you study the Bible, you're right, it should challenge our political bent. Absolutely. You know, when you read about Jesus welcoming the neighbors and the immigrants, you know, or when you read about his inclusiveness, even for women, he was radically political for his time. There's even political messaging all throughout the letters of Paul. Like when Paul says in Romans to confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, you know, we turn that into the Romans road for salvation. But the reason why he was saying confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord is because the Caesars went around saying that they were Lord. That they were called Lord of all. They were even at sometimes called the Son of God. And so when Paul was writing to the church in Rome, he said, while you're being told to say that Caesar is Lord of all, I'm telling you, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord. It's a political statement. He's saying Jesus is Lord and Caesar is not. So I think that Christianity is supposed to be subversive. It's supposed to be counterculture. And what we see in America right now is Christianity being absorbed by an American culture when we're supposed to be counterculture at all times, you know?
And establishment culture. When I see a lot of anti-establishment sentiment in the New Testament especially.
Exactly. But this gets into a Christian nationalism conversation, but basically evangelicals in America have thought that they're making America more Christian, when in reality they've just made Christianity more American. And so they've created this idea of a American Jesus. And Christianity in some ways has become the American religion. It's a state religion in some areas. And I think that that's completely counter of what we're supposed to be doing. In Revelation, there's 7 churches that John writes that letter to, 5 of which are getting rebuked and 2 of which are being congratulated or encouraged. The ones that are getting rebuked are rebuked for forsaking their love of Jesus and embracing Rome. They're being rebuked for embracing the culture of Rome. And I think that that is what American evangelicalism is doing. Just replace Rome with America.
Yo, except for Philly, am I right? Represent.
I've never been that far east, so I don't know. But
Hey, man, come down sometime.
Philly's the one that's congratulated in the Revelation. Same Philadelphia, right?
oh, right, yes, you're right, absolutely.
No, it's
Yeah,
super interesting.
I really hear you. It's very interesting to look at the life of Jesus and how I think it should inform politics, and then look at the way it does inform politics. And I think you made a very good statement when you said that America tends to make Christianity American instead of America Christian.
Well, thank you.
I don't know, if I think about the things that Jesus was worried about was rebuking the leadership at the time, and he had a lot of negative things to say about wealth, and yet the American dream is to be fabulously wealthy. I do want to push back, maybe just semantically, on the idea that Christianity should be by design counterculture. I think that's only if culture sucks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah,
Because hopefully, if heaven was on earth, Christianity wouldn't be counterculture, right? It would be
you're
the
absolutely
culture.
right.
But with that, the idea that I think we have kind of crippled Christianity by making it our culture instead of using it to change our culture for the better.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. Once heaven fully comes to earth, then it'll just be the culture. But yeah, you're right about that for sure.
I've been on a big kick recently. I looked at the New Testament thinking or wondering, like, what is the first like teaching of the New Testament? Like, what is the first like actual like, here is someone who gave a message or a sermon? And what I found was Matthew verse 7, when John the Baptist is baptizing people and is about to baptize Jesus, but he sees all these Pharisees and Sadducees coming to him, and he basically says, like, who are you to come here thinking that like these are meant for you? I think so. I just pulled it up. He says, like, brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? He says, bear fruits worthy of repentance. Do not say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father, for God is able to raise up children to Abraham from these stones. Like, God doesn't care where you came from. He doesn't care that you're elite. What you're supposed to do is repent and be a good person. And like, that's the first teaching in the New Testament. And to me, this goes on that sort of anti-establishment vibe of it, like busting these trusts, kind of like breaking down like the people of power. And like, the point is not that you came from wealth or came from power. The point is who you are. And I do think we had this weird, like, mixed up Christian American idealism and identity that gets kind of gross sometimes. And so I think it's cool coming back to like, yeah, it wasn't always, that's not really what it should be about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that this is even what we see in Revelation. Basically, it's not just about like we're just against any government that's not heaven. It's about it's about this contrast between the kingdom of heaven and the kingdoms of man. That's what Revelation is really about. It's the kingdom of the Lamb being compared and contrasted with the kingdoms of empires on earth, like Rome. And, in Revelation, they use Babylon, but Babylon was basically a word that would stand in for Rome. And so it's basically showing that while we create power through death, Jesus has the power to defeat death itself. While we create power through violence, Jesus does not show violence. So, like, our idea of empire is to expand through violence. Jesus' kingdom is not expanded that way. So Revelation is showing this contrast that I think a lot of American churches are totally missing, which is really upsetting. I see artwork. Well, I don't even know if you could really call it artwork. It's just cruddy stuff that your aunt on Facebook shares. But you see pictures of Jesus like coming back in the clouds with weaponry, with like an AK-47. Yeah, and I'm thinking, how is it that we can think that the God who was on the Sermon of the Mount, because a lot of, I hope I'm not wrong about this, but my understanding is that a lot of Jewish, Messianic Jewish tradition is that Jesus will return onto the mount where the Sermon on the Mount was. And so to think that he would, on that mountain, preach to love your enemy and would preach nonviolence, but yet now he's going to come back to that same spot where he once said, love your enemies, but this time he's holding, an AK-47. I think it's just so anti-Christ,
Agreed. And so how do we I hate to say reclaim Christianity, but I feel like the name Christianity has gotten so mired in all these ideals and stances that to me aren't exactly the point of Christianity. And so like when I say I'm a Christian, it comes with so much background and misconception that it's hard to even say that. So how do we reclaim it?
I think we have conversations like these and more with people in our families. I think that's all we can do is just keep talking about it. I've stopped using the word evangelical. I still call myself a Christian, but I got away from that word. Now people are saying ex-evangelical, which is pretty clever. So, I don't really care for that label anymore, precisely because of what you just said, Luke, about all the baggage that it holds. But I don't know how else we can make it better except for just keep talking to people.
Keep talking, and I think live the life that we want other Christians to live.
Yes,
and, that's
absolutely.
been a big thing for me is like I want to commit myself better to like volunteerism and stuff, just because like COVID really ruined a lot of that. Not to say that I was volunteering every hour of every day beforehand, but like I want to participate more in the world and help people in a more tangible, visceral way.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to do the same thing.
I think it's so important to see that no matter where you stand with your faith, to understand the places that it is affected by your cultural bias, because the more we're aware of that, the more we can try to understand it past that. Not that we can ever really separate from our bias completely, but I come across, I don't want to bring up another tangent as we're winding down here.
Yeah.
But I come across this ideology that is so often like traditional Christianity is devoid of bias, and those attempting to change Christianity or understand it differently are just reading their bias into the totally pure Christian doctrine that was present beforehand. and just understanding like, no, your bias is just from a culture that is more long established, and this bias is just from a culture that is more recent. And neither is necessarily better, so we should examine both to try to understand which is more faithful to the actual message of Scripture.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I totally agree.
Nice. Well, Joey, man, what a conversation. Almost 2 hours here. I really appreciate you cutting the time out of your day to spend it with us and share some of your stances and what you think about things.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I love getting into this kind of stuff, so I really appreciate it. You guys are fun to talk to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
you're a
great
pleasure to be
on.
around yourself, for sure.
All right, cool. Well, hey, do you mind if I plug my podcast?
I was just about to give you that, roll out the red carpet for you. Yeah, so Joey, I know you have a lot of stuff in the works with your TikTok and your upcoming podcast, so yeah, plug away here, my friend.
All right, cool. Well, yeah. So today, when we're recording this, is the day that our podcast launched.
Oh,
On
nice.
YouTube. Yeah, so we're still working through Anchor to get everything approved because the music we're using has to be approved by the artist and, logistics.
Sure.
So it will be out on every podcasting platform soon. But as for right now, we just have the video and audio of it out on YouTube. So check out YouTube, All Things Reconsidered. Myself and my co-host Brandon are on there, and we have a lot of fun. The very first episode, we talk about hell and Revelation a little bit, and we talk about that play Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's psychotic. So we talk about that. It's a lot of fun. So, and we have new episodes every Monday. Also, you can follow both myself and Brandon on TikTok.
What's your TikTok handle?
So mine's just my first and last name, Joey Trieb. Again, I know it's a really weird last name, but
Trieb.
Yes, exactly. And then Brandon is Brandon McAlpine 1. So, but yeah, and you can follow All Things Reconsidered show on Instagram.
Fantastic. Nice. Well,
Awesome.
yeah, Joey, thank you so much for coming on. It was really a pleasure getting to know you, and I wish you all the best. And I'm so glad that your TikTok is taking off, and you're getting all these messages from people saying how you've helped them and have helped them shape their identity and thoughts, or healed some trauma for them. I think that's truly a blessing. I think that's wonderful, wonderful work.
Thank you. I super appreciate the support, and I love what you guys are doing. Keep at it.
Of course, of course. All right, man.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. God bless. Thanks so much for watching this week's episode of Spiritable. If you like what you saw and have comments or questions, feel free to post them under our YouTube video. We try to respond to every comment we get. You can also email us at spiritablepodcast@gmail.com if you have a question that you want to send us directly. If you like what you saw, feel free to like or subscribe wherever you're listening. And especially give us reviews in iTunes. It really helps our algorithm there. Thank you so much. Feel free to check out Joey Trieb on TikTok, and we'll see you next episode.